Okay, we're ready.
Excellent. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Who Will Advocate When You're Gone with the ARC of Northern Virginia. This is a part of our first Friday's future planning, and it is a series that we run for the entire year, usually on the first Friday, and unless there's a holiday. So first I want to say, I hope everybody's doing well and everyone's healthy and staying sane and staying strong. I know it's a very trying time with our children at home with us in particular, and working from home, and everybody trying to live the new reality. So I'm happy that you're here, and I hope that we can take your mind off of all the other things so we can focus on this for the next 2 hours if that's how many questions come up. So this, the ARC of Northern Virginia, next slide. Evelyn, can you move the slide?
Yes, I'm trying to.
Thank you, thank you. So I'll be co-presenting today with Sally Wilklow. I'll start out though about talking about myself. So I've been with the ARC, it will be 15 years. I'll be starting my 15th year in September. My position, Director of Trust, was created 11 years ago in August. And so at that time, the trust program was simply something that the ARC had, but it really wasn't advertised or marketed, and people didn't know about it. And once we started letting people know, the program grew significantly. So we went from having established 120 trusts when I took it over 11 years ago to over 1,700 today, and grew the trust from 3.2 million to 36.6 million. So there's been some significant growth. And interestingly, the research says that most parents don't even know about special needs trusts, and even fewer know about the option of establishing a special needs trust with a nonprofit organization. And obviously that was true, and we showed that by talking about it, people learned about it. So if you haven't heard about trust programs in the past, that's simply because it's not common knowledge. So I'm going to have Sally hold off and introduce herself whenever she starts her part of the presentation. Okay, Sally?
Yes, sounds good.
Okay, next slide. So who are we at the ARC of Northern Virginia? Well, we have a mission. We're part of a national organization with a mission to promote and protect the human rights of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and actively support their full inclusion and participation in the community throughout their lifetimes. Every ARC, every chapter follows that mission. Our chapter is a local chapter, meaning the ARC of Northern Virginia's footprint is Falls Church City, Fairfax, Arlington, and Alexandria City. And we support thousands of people with IDD and their families. We're funded through direct services that we provide, as well as membership dues and fundraising. Okay, next slide. So our trust program we have more than 20 years experience with the trust program, and personally soon over 11 years of experience managing the trust. So our trust department every single day deals with special needs trusts. So we get many calls and many emails on a daily basis, not only from family members, but agencies, community partners, attorneys, etc., asking us for information, because we've become the experts in this field. Although there's still questions that arise that we reach out to our attorney friends for that input as well. As I mentioned, there are more than 600 chapters throughout the United States, and Virginia has 23 chapters. I believe it's 23, 24. I'm always hesitant to quote the specific number because there's a group that's in the process of creating a new chapter. So we're a very strong state chapter-wise, and we work together not only with our sister chapters and the ARC of Virginia and the ARC National, but also with other nonprofit organizations like the Autism Society, Autism Speaks, NAMI, Preemies, the Prader-Willis groups, fetal alcohol, many other nonprofit organizations, because we found out throughout history that it makes a lot more sense to present a united front when talking to legislators, when we're asking for more Medicaid waiver slots or more funding to support individuals with disabilities, more funding to pay those people that work with our clients. So we're very active here, and there are a lot of fantastic organizations in our area as well as nationwide that are advocating for people with disabilities. So that you can better understand the ARCs and what they do, our ARC is an advocacy and educational ARC. So 20% of the ARCs are educational and advocacy ARCs. So Lucy Beadnell, our Director of Advocacy, does a phenomenal job with the local legislators in advocating and bringing in families to talk to them and share their stories, as well as working in Richmond, where she is often during the General Assembly, also bringing in families and asking people to help support the efforts that support our children. And then when the ARC National needs some extra support, we can cross the river and go over there and help them on the Hill if need be. So there's a lot of advocacy work going on. And then educationally, so we have things like the First Fridays, and I also offer Trust Talk Tuesdays, so 2 Tuesdays a month for an hour and a half. We're now doing Zoom meetings, and I talk about special needs trusts in general, and then our program in particular, and then people can also ask about any of the services, disability services. Not only IDD, but also mental health and physical disabilities. So the trust program serves all of Virginia, all of Maryland, and Washington, D.C., and any disability. So we have that educational programming, and then I do everybody has the opportunity to participate in one free 1-hour consultation with me. My coworker, Diane Monick, is running a transition series, and she runs our transition programming as well as the transition guides that are on the website. And so, you know, this fall, the transition series is running virtually. And I know there's information on the website now. And when our Director of Communications returns from vacation, he's going to update it with Diane's new updates. So look at that page, Transition Series. It's meant for parents and caregivers of individuals between 14 and 26, as well as professionals. And there are 2 tracks that run. One is for the parents, professional, caregivers, etc., and the other is for the students. And Diane has created a great partnership and collaborative partnership with Marymount University. And so the Marymount students are the ones who, under Diane's direction, run the student track, while Diane is running the track for the adults. And basically, it's a crash course and everything you need to know and should be doing if you have the time, hopefully, to get things prepared. Because when our children exit the school system, the entitlement program, so IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Act, falls away, and then there are no more programs that are entitlements. And so it's important to understand the many different systems that you will need to be navigating once they've exited, at the latest, when they've exited the school system. And we help you put together a long-term plan. We also have a DD waiver, Developmental Disability Medicaid Waiver program at the ARC of Northern Virginia. So my colleagues are support coordinators for, I'm going to guess the number, and it's around 120 clients, I believe. And we have the Guardianship of Last Resort program, which is funded through the Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services with 50 clients. So that's what the ARC of Northern Virginia does. Now, if you cross the county line and go into the Loudoun County, for example, the ARC of Loudoun County has the Paxton campus. They have the Ally Resource Center with advocates there, and a lot of educational programs as well. They have a phenomenal gym with special equipment for people that need more than just the average gym's equipment. And so, although they do have workshops, they're more of a service provider as opposed to education, and advocacy. So that's that other 80%. The ARC of Greater Prince William County has residential, transportation, day program, early intervention, therapeutic services. So that's what differentiates us from the other chapters. We're the world's largest community-based organization of and for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And our ARC has over 57 years of experience. The national ARC is over 60 years old. Next slide, please. So about long-term planning, as many of you know, and I forgot to mention this when I was introducing myself, I'm the mother of 2 young adults with disabilities. Sky is 20 and Sheridan is 26, and they're out of the house today, and they've been given direction to stay away until their workout program at 11 o'clock so that I can have some peace and quiet. But anyway, I not only work this topic, but I also live in the disability world. And so I'm well versed on both sides of the spectrum. And one of the things that I've found out anytime I hire a new care attendant, for example, is I have to explain who they are and what they like and what they need to be doing. And then just a couple of days ago, I finally realized that if I finished their long-term plans, I could just hand those to the caregivers and they could read them, and I wouldn't have to explain everything all the time because I would have a guidance document completed that I could share with them. I've been working on their long-term plan for a while, and it's still not complete, which is okay, but because at least I'm getting something on paper. When we talk about long-term plans, with the trust program, we call it a trust plan. And it's the least amount of information we'd like to have from the parents, family members, siblings, whomever is writing it, or the individual themselves, so that we have a basis, a foundation of information that can tell us who we're working with, what they like, what their likes are, what their dislikes are, what they're good at doing, what they hate to do. You know, those tried and true things that work for them. You'll see it's also called a letter of intent. So if you put in letter of intent in your search engine, you'll get probably 1 billion hits of templates from all over the place. What we're calling it at the ARC of Northern Virginia, in addition to the trust plan, which is the basic information that you can write up and give us, is a long-term advocacy plan. And we actually have long-term advocacy plans and short-term advocacy plans. And when I'm done talking, Sally's going to take over and talk to you about what we're doing at the ARC with that. But again, why do you do this? Why is it important to have a long-term plan? Well, as you know, we've spent as parents a lot of time raising our children and learning things and trying things. And we know that what works and we know that what doesn't work. And by writing it down, it helps us organize our thoughts, but it also memorializes what we know, because nobody knows as much as we know about our kids. And it's important to share that, because when we're gone, when we're unable or unwilling to provide care anymore for our children, somebody else, we're hoping that there's going to be somebody else there to do that. I always say the 2 most important things to me are, 1, that my children have a roof over their heads, and 2, that there's somebody there to advocate for them on their behalf when I'm gone. And then everything else can come into place. But if they have somewhere to live, a safe living space, and they have somebody to advocate for them when I'm gone, then I feel confident that they're going to be taken care of. So in writing the long-term plan, there are many different areas you consider, and those are the first 2 that I just mentioned, that the housing and who's going to advocate. Other things are like health and recreational, employment, etc. So because my girls are able to share with me what they see for their future, I'm able to add their thoughts, their wishes into the plan. If your children are nonverbal and don't use a communication device, then you're using, based on your knowledge, what you feel they can share with you. What I intend to do when I'm done is I'll give a final copy to the ARC of Northern Virginia, because that's where my girls' trusts are. But I'm also going to share it with some people that are significant in my daughter's lives. We have 2 care attendants that have been with us off and on over the last 8 years. We've always stayed in touch. They have other full-time jobs. So they're my true backups if something happens. And I'll share it with my close friends as well as my siblings and some of their second cousins who don't live in the area, but I'm really hoping that by sharing this plan with them, they'll see that there's money in the trust. So if they're going on vacation, to swing by and pick up the girls and take them with them. And it doesn't have to come out of their pocket. I want to put a plan together that secures a safe future for my children, and let other people know that I'm counting on them in a subtle way. I'm counting on them to be there for them when I'm gone. And of course, because it's a guidance document and we own it, I own it, right? You write it, you own it, then you can change it at any given time. The important thing is as you're making changes to it, and we recommend making changes around the birthday of the individual, if not in between, but at least review it once a year. Then I would send the updated copies to people so that they have it on file and they can get rid of the old copy. So you can either do that on their own, or you can do it with Sally, coached by the ARC. And some people have already started working with Sally. So she's an independent contractor with the ARC of Northern Virginia. And I believe that the next slide, Evelyn, am I correct that the next slide goes into Sally's presentation?
Yes, the next slide is Sally's Advocate Program.
Excellent. So then we'll move on to the next slide. I'll stop talking and let Sally take over. And Sally, by the way, is a wonderful human being. And we've been working together. We've been talking for several months, probably over a year. And we've been working together for the last couple of months as our advocate, one of our advocates that working with the ARC of Northern Virginia. So Sally, take it away.
Thanks, Tia. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to share the new model we've come up with to deliver advocacy services, and I think it has a lot of advantages over the previous model, which employed one full-time staff member of the ARC to provide advocacy. Our goal here is to build a team of advocates that I think will offer, in addition to providing the ARC with additional revenue, because they're not covering the overhead of having staff, that allows them to generate some revenue to support the other programs of the ARC. It also, I think, using, again, this team of advocates allows a lot more flexibility, responsiveness, continuity. So if the advocate leaves, there's another advocate there that can pick up and continue. There can be a smooth transition, that kind of thing. And I think also variety. You know, if we build this team, we have people with differing skills, backgrounds, diversity. We can best pair our advocates with the clients that they're working with. So there are a lot of advantages to this program, and I'm really excited about it and growing it. Personally, I have a master's in social work, and I have over 30 years of experience working with a variety of at-risk populations. So there's a breadth of experience, but as I've worked, I've really come to appreciate the advocate role, which includes being home-based and community-based. And I think this is really an important aspect of advocacy work, because I'm able to go out and meet the person where they are, where they reside, where they function. And I think it does reduce somewhat some of the maybe apprehensions or defensiveness of our clients. When you come to their home, you're their guest. So you create a bond, but you're also led into a different view. So you're able to see where they're living, how they function in their environment, and with the various supports and things they have going on. And it also does allow us to become aware if a a crisis arises, which you wouldn't necessarily if the advocate were coming to you in your office or you were contacting them over the phone. So those are some advantages. And I've also learned through my work to really the importance of collaboration, that there are a lot of resources both within an individual's familial and friendship set, but also in the community. And no one can do this alone. It really takes pulling in all the resources and coordinating them effectively to benefit the individual. However, given my professional experience aside, I think the most valuable experience I bring to this is being the mom of a daughter with severe and profound disabilities. She suffered an ischemic brain event when she was a year old and was left with multiple and very serious disabilities. She was nonverbal, she was tube fed, wheelchair bound, seizure disorder, so a lot of needs. And even with my background in advocacy, I can relate to feeling overwhelmed, vulnerable, fearful. Who's gonna speak for her? She's nonverbal. Who's gonna speak for her when we're gone? What's gonna happen to her? And also, I was concerned for my other children. I wanted to normalize family life as much as possible for all of us, but I also wanted them to just continue to be her sister as she aged and not have a burden of being a professional advocate or a power of attorney or, those kinds of things. So I also, in that process, did come to recognize that when you're in the middle of it and the identified person is your flesh and blood, there are always biases and fears and feelings that cloud sometimes your ability to look at a situation objectively and make informed decisions. So in sum, I would have most definitely, if my daughter had not passed away at the age of 12, been a consumer of a long-term advocacy plan with the ARC, for sure. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have two basic types of advocacy plans through the ARC. The first one is a short-term advocacy plan. And as it says, it's really going to focus on not the lifespan of the individual, but rather a specific point in time where there are some urgent and pretty obvious needs. So this is often triggered by events. Somebody becomes homeless, there's a medical crisis, anything like that. So we try to be absolutely as responsive as possible. So if there are crisis intervention needs, I can be there on the scene, do some quick problem solving, and get some services and a plan in place that's going to help stabilize the situation. The short-term plan usually addresses 1 to 3 goals. So we're not going to be sitting down and looking at the entire situation for the individual, but what are the problems, what are the needs right now, and how do we get those resolved as soon as possible? Often in the course of doing the short-term plan, once things settle down, people are able to kind of take a breath and look at where things are. They do transition to long-term plans because the people involved realize that crises can happen again, or the situation is such that we really need some kind of ongoing guidance for the individual. Next, please. So an illustration of a short-term plan regards a young man by the name of Dan. I got a call several weeks ago about this 19-year-old with autism. He had been raised by both parents. However, mother passed away 2 years ago. Both parents had very significant substance abuse problems. And this guy, well, let me finish talking about him. He was diagnosed with pervasive developmental delays and encephalopathy at the age of 3. However, parents were very distrustful of the system of agencies and bureaucracies and chose not to utilize anything. So this 19-year-old male has never had any services. He was homeschooled. But we have absolutely no records on him. We have the evaluation that was done when he was 3 and a birth certificate. So we're really kind of starting from scratch here. He was suddenly abandoned by his father with a substance abuse problem. The father left him with a family friend rather than other family members because during the course of his marriage, the couple came to distrust the rest of the family. They felt everyone was out to take this child away from them. So they were really trying to go it alone. And I think, you know, after the mother passed away, dad with significant substance abuse just was not able to provide for this young man. Although I did note, and we'll talk about strength-based approaches later on, there is an extremely strong emotional bond between father and son. Okay, next slide, please. So the first thing I did, I went out and I met with the family that's currently housing this young man. Again, family friends with no legal authority, but did have probably the closest relationship outside his father with the young man. The first thing I did, and they were leery of calling Adult Protective Services, again, because of this distrust and fear that the young man was going to be taken away from them. And I did reassure them that no one, and particularly Adult Services, would want to remove him from a stable, loving environment. I mean, there aren't enough placements, as we all know, and we're always looking for the least restrictive environment. And just reinforcing that, I think, gave them a level of comfort, but I was the one to make the call to Adult Protective Services. And they were very responsive. The worker came out, did an immediate application for SSI and Medicaid, and started those processes going. But I did want to have someone in that capacity to oversee the welfare of this young man, because I really did not know at this point what the strengths and weaknesses were and how it was going to go. So my initial focus is definitely supporting those temporary caregivers. There's a little dissension among the group. There's 3. There's a couple and their adult daughter. Some of them feel like they've taken on more than they can handle. The wife is very, very committed and believes that she can continue providing that stability for the young man. So giving them a lot of support, talking them through the situation, doing some problem solving. I've been making regular phone contacts with them to see how things are going, working in some services that can provide them with some respite as needed and take over some of the functions that they're playing right now, such as assistance with grooming, ADLs, socialization, those kinds of things. So they can really focus on just being a supportive, a support for the young man. I have worked to facilitate the engagement and cooperation of the distant relatives on his behalf. There's a little friction between the two sides, again, because of this sort of what I call a myth that, that everybody wanted to remove Brendan from the situation. And that's far from the truth. So I've been collectively engaging them through emails and also through Zoom calls so we can talk through what's happening. This distant side, the young man lives in southern Maryland, but the distant relatives, which are aunts, are in Northern Virginia, but they have offered to provide weekend respite for the main caregivers, offered to help with obtaining clothing and other concrete needs for the young man. And the 2 aunts are the representatives for the trust that we hold at the Arc of Northern Virginia.
What Sally's describing is, just so you know, it's a hypothetical situation. So she's combined some different cases together. So, the names have been changed to protect the innocent, right? And this is just like you see on any of the TV shows. So it's a combination of experiences. And I wanted to say with Sally, because of her social work background, she's recognizing that the familiar interactions that are going on too, and the guilt and the need to help, and everybody coming from a different perspective. And it's so good to have a third party, objective, qualified, experienced person in a situation like this who can wade through the the quagmire and figure out what's the priority and what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we are able to utilize the trust to, as everyone knows, probably there is often a long wait to get government services approved and instituted. So the aunts are willing to utilize the trust to, in the short term, engage some in-home services to relieve the caregivers, promote socialization, work on activities of daily living and those kinds of things. We've also set up a medical evaluation, very concerned about, just visibly the decline in this young man from when the relatives last saw him at Christmas and where he is now. So that's really important. And they're going to do that privately as well because Medicaid isn't yet approved. There were concerns on the part of the family caring for the young man. What kind of authority do we have if he gets COVID or, something happens, and they wanted, to feel like they had the authority to make decisions for him. So we've contacted an elder law attorney in their area. One real benefit, is sometimes, like for instance, in this case that I'm thinking of right now, both the adult services worker and myself, after spending some time with the young man, feel like he does have the capacity to express his needs and make some decisions for himself. And so that will hopefully, we do need to get a certificate of capacity, but that would allow us to move forward without having to go through court for guardianship and those kinds of things. Next slide, please. So often, as I mentioned earlier, a short-term plan will transition to a long-term plan. So once the fires are out, things are relatively stable. Folks sit back and say, wow, where do we go from here? How do we make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen again? And how do we make sure that his needs or his wishes and those of whichever family member is going to be following him can be guaranteed. So, we're going to coordinate with adult services to maximize Dan's utilization of all the benefits and services he's eligible for. We're going to apply for the applicable Medicaid waiver, and the ARC of Southern Maryland is helping me on this because each state is set up a little differently, and Southern Maryland apparently has recently restructured so the waivers are no longer with the Community Services Board or Department of Mental Health, but has transitioned to the departments for disabilities. So, and they've renamed their waivers and those kind of things. So they've been real helpful. Exploring housing options. Will the current caregivers be willing and able to continue to provide him housing, or if not, or if it seems like a better option for him, maybe a group home. He's clearly not, I don't think, an option for residential services, but we're going to look at all the options available in his community as we're looking long-term and trying to decide, what's the best for him. Again, he's a young man who's never had that we can discern educational or vocational interventions or services, but does express a lot of interest. Did express an interest in getting his GED. So we're going to refer him for assessments in those areas, see what programs are available with the goal of increasing his independence. We're going to, and I would always do this, and it's maybe not necessarily instinctive. You've got a man who's got a serious substance abuse problem. Why would you want him involved in planning for this vulnerable young man? But on the other hand, he is the father. They have a very strong bond, and that bond and the ability to be involved in that planning and have his wishes understood is still very important for both of them. And it just may, we can hope, be the trigger for the father to decide it's time to get clean. So, I would be available to offer resources there if he decides he wants them. increase access to appropriate opportunities for socialization. Again, he didn't go to school. He wasn't in any programs. I think mom and dad were his primary social system, but he is verbal. He's got a lot of interests. He loves to play board games and those kinds of things. So looking for opportunities for him to get out during the day, be with other people, explore his interests, those sorts of things. And then, of course, we're going to follow up on any identified medical issues. Again, we don't have records, but there's some sort of family lore that he may have had some significant gastrointestinal surgery when he was younger. So we've got to figure out what's going on and address those needs as well. Next slide. So the long-term advocacy plans, I think the biggest differentiation is we are not just looking at the individual at a certain point in time. We're really focusing on the lifespan of the beneficiary, however long that may be. Try to anticipate as best we can who will be available after primary caregivers perhaps are gone, how the person's needs may change, those kinds of things. But again, we're looking at creating a guidance document that represents the beneficiary and the grantor's wishes, so that, as Tia mentioned in her situation, you know, if she's not there to speak for the person, or the person has difficulty advocating for themselves, everything's there in concrete, and anybody can step in and be able to read that plan and understand the individual, their needs, their wishes, etc. We start with a comprehensive assessment. So with a short-term plan, we are going to consider, you know, if there are strengths we can draw upon or significant issues in other areas, of course, we're going to address those, but we're really going to focus on just thoroughly assessing the 2 or 3 immediate needs and areas of need. Whereas our comprehensive assessment is going to look at all areas of needs and strengths, and that includes 16 areas. I mean, anything that will impact upon the individual's functioning. So we look at medical, educational, vocational, financial, legal, you know, environmental, and the list goes on. So it will be really comprehensive. And it may include unlimited goals. So as we really do the assessment and identify area of needs, there may be many, but we are going to prioritize and focus on the most important first. And objectives may be ongoing. So if we do have a long-term plan that has many goals, that could be ongoing. Or we may be in sort of a place where we've set the plan and things are where they're supposed to be, but all of a sudden something changes and you know, things trigger a crisis or an event, and then we may need to be more intensive again at that point. And it may require another short-term plan in order to address those things. As Tia mentioned, that we do review the plan ideally annually with the grantor and the beneficiary. Just by virtue of aging, individuals' needs change. There may be new people to add to the support system. The individual may have lost people in their support system, those kinds of things. So we want to make sure that it's as current and up to date as possible. Next slide, please. Okay, another case illustration I've called Joey. And as Tia said, yes, these are sort of compilations that kind of pulled together the scenario to illustrate for you. So this guy has been a service consumer since he was diagnosed with schizophrenia at the age of 16. He's received a lot of services, everything ranging from institutionalization to where he is now, which is in a semi-independent living situation. And he does have a lot of community supports in there. Mother was the original POA, but she passed away, and now the powers of attorney are 2 sisters who live out of state. And so as committed as they are, they can't be there to really, you know, monitor Joey's well-being and functioning, you know, in person. And so it's really valuable to them and for their peace of mind to have the ARC involved. Next slide. So we had been in, as I said, sort of a monitoring role. We'd been the long-term plan at that point said we were going to be doing a monthly visit so we can see how he's doing, those kinds of things, coordinate with and keep track of what service he's receiving, make sure that they're being effective and efficient, that kind of thing. And in my last visit, I noted some pretty significant concerns about his health status related to non-compliance, both with ADLs and with medication. So again, it's been really important to keep, we didn't want, any surprises for the POA. So I've been in regular touch with them about the concerns. I've been able to send them pictures of him and just let them know what we're doing. And again, they've been appreciative of having that peace of mind and knowing that somebody's there. One big thing with this young man has been coordinating the community service managers. He's involved with, as I said, a number of agencies. And some, although they all have service managers, some are more involved than others. Some are kind of carrying him as, a number on their huge caseload. And others are more involved. So really trying to help everybody understand what each other's role is, who's doing what, are there any gaps in services, is there any overlap in services or duplication that we can minimize. So I've been working really closely with one case manager in particular, and she had been really, I guess, the eyes and ears for the POAs for a while, and they were concerned that she was overwhelmed, that she, because of the non-compliance issues and how significant his needs are, that she was overwhelmed. And one of the things they wanted was for me to support this other person and be somewhat of a team with her until we got things stabilized. And I think that's been effective. So the first thing I did was said, we need to assess these medical concerns and figure out what's going on. And he has extreme edema in the legs, skin breakdown, swelling and redness. So there is a home health agency involved. The RN has not visited since the initial intake when they assigned aides, caregivers, to the client. So I contacted the RN, asked her to meet me there, take a look at what was going on. And she said, oh my gosh, yes, he has cellulitis in his feet. He needs an antibiotic. Well, this gentleman does not like to go to doctors. He's very resistant to that. When this other case manager had actually called an ambulance for him in the past, he's refused to be transported. So first thing I did was locate a doctor who was willing to make a home visit for us and see the client and make appropriate recommendations and prescriptions and that kind of thing. The non-compliance is around, yes, about psychiatric meds, but also about regarding blood pressure meds. And we hadn't had a good handle on that. They are using aides in the home to help with things like getting meals, grooming, ADLs, taking medication, but they hadn't been documenting for us. And I said, we really need a record of when he's taking his medication and not, what his blood pressure readings are, et cetera. And so they started doing that. And now we have an accurate record that without taking the oral medication, his blood pressure is very high, at a concerning level. So we're going to be looking with his family doctor about possibly using a blood pressure patch that we can, the caregiver can put on his back, and then he'll be sure to maintain a reasonable level in his blood pressure. He had been getting injections for his psychotropic meds. They've stopped that with COVID. I don't know if patches are available for that, but that's still a concern. I do plan to consult with a psychiatrist next time he has a visit with a psychiatrist, because both the nurse and I have a question whether or not he's on the most appropriate medication. There's no active hallucinating. He's not aggressive. He's very passive, actually. And if there might be something that could help with a compliance issue, and that wouldn't have side effects. He complains of side effects. So, and then the other thing is just what are some other strategies? You know, let's get creative here to try to increase compliance. It was mentioned to me that the only thing that motivates this gentleman is money. He gets a weekly allowance for his food and, you know, other routine needs. And I thought, well, you know, I wonder if he had the opportunity to earn some extra spending money, if he'd be willing to contract with me, if we could document, and I was going to, you know, let him pick the area of compliance that he felt he could, whether it's regular bathing, whether it's the medication, and in exchange for documented compliance, he could earn extra money. He's kind of wavered on this, so we've talked about it, and he's been engaged and said, yeah, that sounds good, that sounds good. But then because of some paranoid, you know, ideation, he tends to kind of pull back from that. So I haven't succeeded in that yet, but it's something we're going to continue trying.
Sally, let me intervene because, so I hope everybody's hearing what Sally's saying. There were a team of people, a handful, I don't know how many exactly, but there were caregivers coming into the home. There's another agency working with this hypothetical individual. There's this, that, and the other thing, but no one was taking responsibility for coordinating the services to the level that he obviously needs them. So when Sally walks in and sees what's going on, and the hypothetical visit is scheduled for monthly, but she walks in and sees that things have deteriorated, she's able to go in and provide that support coordination like as she described, and get these different people on board and doing things, and then directing them in a way to make sure that his needs are being addressed, and other ideas are being put on the table as to how to better serve this person who's unable to either identify, recognize, or verbalize what's going on in his life. So this could have turned into a life-threatening situation with the deterioration of this, that, and the other thing. So it's just so invaluable what Sally is doing by going in and gently coordinating everybody to be doing what needs to get done on behalf of this person. Thank you, Sally.
Next slide, please. Okay, this is another example of a long-term plan. This gentleman, Brian, is 37 years old. And I just said with significant family history, but I think I'll show you how it is important down the line. But he was raised by his father and a very, an alcoholic mother who was very unstable, very manipulative, very debasing of him. And I think that history had a significant impact on his psyche, his self-esteem, his self-image, his ability to make decisions and be independent. Also, he was a young man in school that was labeled lazy. Parents went several times to the school system asking for evaluations for special education and kept getting the diagnosis of lazy. When he turned 19, they had him privately diagnosed with neuropsychological evaluation and psychiatric evaluation. He was diagnosed with mild autism, but also with a very significant learning disability. Which again, you know, being labeled, not having those needs addressed and being labeled as just a lazy person, I think has had a big impact on this young man. Next slide. Okay, so the parents in this situation, dad and stepmom now. The stepmom and the gentleman are very bonded. It's a very supportive family unit. They don't live far from him. But they're at a point where they both retired. They own property in Ireland, and they want to spend 6 months of the year in Ireland, and they want to travel, and they've got all those things you want to do when you're retired. but are very concerned because he is so dependent on them for even the littlest decision, and concerned that he needs to begin learning to assert his independence where possible, and where not, to put in other resources or services to help him. So they're always going to be there for him, but maybe not able to provide the same level of support as they have been. So the first thing we did was, well, no, I'm in the process of, I should say, a mental health evaluation and treatment. It is my feeling, and the parents agree with this as well, that while the autism is present, it's not the factor that's impacting most on this gentleman's functioning. I think all of those things that happened in his early childhood, I mean, he continues to fear his mother, that the mother is going to reappear. And, you know, there's just a lot going on there. So what we're going to do is secure mental health evaluation and appropriate treatment. Well, I think he probably would benefit from individual treatment to address those issues. He's had a lot of trouble with social skills. He's been in social skills groups. He's, you know, done everything that's out there and available. But that has been the primary factor for him losing jobs, because he can't problem solve, he can't express his needs, and he just waits until things absolutely blow up and fall apart. So I'm hoping group treatment down the road with, you know, a standard, whether it's a depression group or something with other adults, would serve two purposes. You know, on one hand, address his individual needs, but also give him that real-time feedback on social interactions, because I really don't think he's got very good self-insight into how he's presenting and those kinds of things. And at the same time, you know, he needs a boost in self-esteem, and in a group setting, he would be able to also help others. So that's kind of what we're looking for right now. His initial response was, well, I'm not crazy. So I've been working with him to understand, you know, that mental health treatment is really about learning more about yourself and, you know, how you operate and how to be successful in social interactions and all those things. And so he's come around, and he is actually at this point saying, yes, I am willing to go for evaluation and treatment. We're coordinating with current waiver services. He has the building independence waiver. So there have been services involved, but again, it's really important to figure out who's doing what. You know, sometimes the base goal may seem the same, you know, becoming more independent, but whereas his worker from the waiver is working on going into grocery stores and learning how to make a shopping list and buying appropriate food and cooking appropriate meals and that kind of thing. Mine, again, is more focused on the problem solving, you know, recognizing his feelings and the impact they have on his actions, the connection there, and being more proactive. This is a guy who has big dreams. He loves the fact that he can present in his words, as normal. He doesn't, I would say that his autistic tendencies are not obvious when you first meet him. And so people do have different expectations of him. So, you know, helping him really understand himself and how to set goals and get what he wants. He tends to create big goals. You know, I want to be a rock star, but there's no sense of how do I get there, you know, and operationalizing goals and starting. And this also will allow him, if we can break it down into small enough pieces, to experience some success. And, you know, with each little success, you build on that and you build on your self-confidence. Also understanding that small mistakes are not the end of the world. You know, that's how we learn. And I really do believe that a lot of, and I certainly was this way with my daughter, you know, that we do protect and shelter and provide all kinds of services for our, you know, our young people with disabilities, but they don't go through that typical process necessarily that we do as teenagers of, you know, being independent and, you know, doing what you want and making mistakes. But that's how we learn. So, you know, small mistakes are a good thing. Working with the parents to identify feelings and patterns of behavior that undermine his independence. And that speaks to, you know, the same issue by their own admission. They do enable him quite a bit because they are there to bail him out for every little thing. So we're going to be, doing some problem solving and working on a little flow chart. He is visual, a little flow chart. Okay, if a problem happens and it's in this area, what do I do? What are the options? And, so he can kind of practice that problem solving behavior, and then go back and report his success to his parents rather than asking for the help. So I've talked about that a little bit, realistic goals, improved accountability and follow through. So again, we want him to accept not only accountability for mistakes, but accountability for his successes. We may create a short-term plan for him depending on, I think some of the building independent services are getting ready to pull out. We're going to have a conference with everybody involved with that waiver plan, myself, the parents, and the individual. So we're going to kind of look at where are the needs right now. Is there anything that really needs to be addressed emergently? We're going to operationalize his employment goals. So he is in employment now, but he tends to not value or connect with his employment, which I think is a defense because he feels like something's going to go wrong. He's going to blow up. He's going to get fired. So looking at really what are his goals, and maybe it's not slinging pizza or you fill in gas tanks or whatever, but what's a good goal for him and what does he want? We do need to identify successor representatives. Again, if the parents are out of the country, something happens to the parents, we need to have somebody else there who can make sure to understand this plan and be able to implement it for him. Talked about the social skills development. I really think to get into a group treatment situation that isn't necessarily focused on the social skills development, but it's a byproduct of being in a group situation and being followed by individual therapy, I think could really help him get the feedback he needs to look at his social skills. And again, opportunities for success aimed at improving his self-esteem. So that's, again, so it's less specific, and you can see the goals are a little bit more global, a little bit more general. So, we're going to identify which are the things that are most important at this point and operationalize those. So these are very general, but we are going to break them down into steps that we can measure and be accountable for progress. And if we're not making progress, then we need to change the goal. We need to come up with a different plan. Okay, next, please. So again, these are just some of the advocacy services that are available. A general rule of thumb, it almost includes anything that's going to benefit the individual, as long as it can't be provided by another agency or a benefit. So we don't want to be duplicating something that the consumer can get for free or by qualifying somewhere else. But the attending annual meetings with the agencies, as I'm going to be doing with this other young man, is really important. Make sure everybody's on task. The goals and functions are clear. There aren't gaps. There isn't overlap. Support coordination, same thing, wraparound services, employment options, housing options, and these are always changing. Another good reason to revisit plans, I think, annually, because sometimes it's just a matter of renaming, but the services, but sometimes new services come online or old services have 5 or 10-year waiting lists and aren't really an option. Health and well-being, strengthening, the resources that the person has, encouraging healthy relationships, and having everybody working towards the same goals. Next, please. Oh, Tia?
Yes.
Did you want to add something?
No, I was just looking at the question box.
Okay, next, please. So the advocate approach, what makes it sort of unique and what makes it valuable? The first thing being neutral and objective. So we have an overview of what's out there, what's available. When we walk into the system, we are experienced, but this is a new situation, a new person, a new family, a new community. And we can look at it with unbiased eyes and really identify, where there are strengths, where people maybe haven't seen them before. Or maybe perhaps what's perceived as a problem really isn't so much, but it's more something tangential to that. So having that neutrality and objectivity is important. As a parent, again, I knew at times my vision was clouded, both because of my love and, concerns for my daughter, but also, just being the mom, you have a totally different relationship and a totally different perspective being the mom or the POA or the guardian than you do as somebody from the outside looking in. It absolutely values the wishes of the beneficiary and grantor. Oftentimes when providers are in a less global kind of role, so they are administering a specific service or a specific benefit, they may look just to plugging the person into that benefit and focusing on that one area of need or function. Well, this is going to value the wishes of the beneficiary and the grantor. So where rather than fitting the person into the service, what kind of service net or strengths net can we provide that's going to honor those wishes and needs of the beneficiary and grantor. It's strength-based, which is really important because, again, that honors self-determination, but it also focuses on building strengths. Yes, we identify needs and we have to mitigate, any problems. Building and supporting the strengths in the support system, in the community, in the individual, build on those strengths, and that creates a stronger system, a stronger person, and a better outcome, rather than focusing just on the deficits. It's about empowerment, really, and helping the person recognize the strengths that they have and that they can draw upon. It also recognizes that people are resilient and able to make choices. Regardless, except for possibly the completely nonverbal, I think we all have an ability to express our preferences, whether it's, through body language, verbal skills, reactions, those kinds of things. It's systems focused, and this is a critical point too. So it's holistic, it's multidisciplinary. It recognizes you can't truly understand an individual's situation in isolation, that we are all part of systems, family systems, neighborhood systems, community systems, school systems, you name it. We're all part of this interconnected web, if you will. And a change in one part of the system automatically affects all the other interconnected things. So we really have to look at making small changes and recognizing that can create greater change in the system. Collaborative, as I mentioned, so we are going to maximize utilization of all of the resources that are available, and having someone who can be sort of the fulcrum is important. It is with a situation, that young man who's 19 years old. So there are a lot of sort of disparate pieces, family and otherwise, that are trying to work on behalf of this young man. But I am the one who is tying it together and making sure everybody is informed of what's going on. Community-based, again, is so important because I believe it's very difficult to really understand the functioning and how things are impacting an individual when they come into an office and sit down with you. You have to rely on strictly the information that they are able and willing to provide you. You don't get to have you don't get to experience firsthand their environmental situation, their interactions with the environment, those kinds of things. So that's really important. Again, we're going to maximize use of government benefits and services. We don't want to spend any money that doesn't need to be spent. So our services are going to focus on things that aren't available through the government. And again, just eyes and ears to monitor beneficiaries' welfare and give that peace of mind to the caregivers. Did you have anything else on that, Tia?
Excellent. There are quite a few questions, and so Evelyn, I think the next slide is the question slide. I could be wrong, but Evelyn's going to assist you in reading the questions so that you may answer them, and then I may join in at some point if I need to add something.
Okay.
We just have a few more slides and then we'll get to other questions.
Sorry, I can't. Good.
No worries.
Of course, how it works. So I am welcome to take phone calls or emails from anybody who has an interest in the advocacy program, and we'll provide you with a free, short consultation over the phone to talk about your specific situation, what your concerns are, and a general sense of what kind of goals or services we might be able to provide. If it's something that you do feel like you want to be involved with, we would sign a services agreement that authorizes the ARC to provide the services. And that's going to, if it's a short-term need, we're going to be specific on that service agreement about the areas, the 2 or 3 areas that we're going to address. And if we're going to do a long-term service agreement, we're going to do an assessment first, and then our ongoing service plan will be based upon that, and usually includes some kind of limit of either visits or hours per month based on the goals that we set. So I will work with the client, the representative, the guardian, whomever, to create that plan and agree upon what our goals are and what the intervention plan is going to look like. Can be shorter or long term, and always confidential. We will also request that you sign a release of information so that we can collaborate with other agencies and people involved to get the most information. Next. Yeah, so for the short-term plan, again, it's very focused and limited. So the rates you see on either side of the /1, the first one, the lower one, is for those who have trust with the ARC of Northern Virginia. We do provide advocacy services for those who don't, but the fee is a little bit higher, so that would be $500. And that's going to include the consultation, the assessment, and writing the advocacy plan. And then any ongoing services to implement that plan would be billed at the hourly rate, which is $90 for those with trust and $130 per hour without a trust. For the long-term advocacy plan, which again includes a comprehensive assessment and a comprehensive plan, is $1,300 for those with trust, $2,000 without. It does include multiple consultations and communications and assessments, and then the writing of the advocacy plan. You are again involved in that. I would provide you with a draft first, and we can work till it's a final product that everybody's happy with. And then the annual review, which is strongly included to make sure that the plan is up to date and still pertinent, is $130. That's a flat rate. Next. Okay, there we go.
All right, so we have some questions. There's quite a lot from the webinar folks, so I'm just going to read it out to you, Sally, and if you could address them, that would be great. So the first question is, can you show a scenario where there are no parents around, but there's a trust with us and then a letter of intent in place, and the adult child has benefit of waiver services?
Well, so the middle scenario I gave you was I think similar to what you're talking about. So this gentleman parents are gone. Parents are the ones who funded the trust, established the original plan for him. They are gone. There is no on-site advocate, or I'm sorry, power of attorney representative. The powers of attorney are out of state. So, that situation is sort of pertinent. He does not receive waiver services, but he is significantly involved in all kinds of other programs, receiving mental health services, housing services, support, in-home supports to support his housing, etc. So, I mean, that is a bit similar to having waiver services.
So that letter of intent, that long-term advocacy plan, is driving the services the advocate provides. And so there may be, as Sally mentioned, one monthly visit, a physical visit once a month listed in that plan. And for example, with my girls, whatever the technology is at that point, whether it's texting or video conferencing, but I'd like the advocate to check in at least every other week with them as well. And then there are those trigger events, such as, because there are waiver services, I would like the advocate to attend the individual services planning meeting annually. And when the CSB does a drop-in to talk with my daughters, I'd like the advocate to be there as well. So I've signed those consent forms and with no end date, so that the advocate can be involved. So it's those eyes and ears that Sally mentioned on one of her slides. And so when my eyes and ears are no longer there, then that advocates are there to implement the plan, and whatever that plan is, to make sure that they're healthy in my girl's situation, they're taken care of, they're exercising, and to help put services in place if they're lacking. And as well as using, again, the waiver services whenever possible, so that the government is paying for those services instead of the trust paying for the services. And then helping to identify those services so the advocate isn't the one, for example, taking the client to the doctor's appointment. So we don't drive people anyway, but the advocate isn't the person driving them. There may be a companion care service that we use that's $30 an hour that drives them back and forth, or they need help with grocery shopping, and in the waiver, the companion could be doing that with them, or the attendant could be doing that with them. But if they didn't have the waiver, then we would again use one of the agencies that we use to escort that person and help them with their shopping. Evelyn?
Yeah, so that's anything else from you guys for this question, or we finished? Okay. All right, so the next question is, someone is asking if Sally's advocate services is similar to a care manager.
In my experience, the care managers, again, have a more narrow focus depending on which agency they're working with. So one may be focused, specifically on housing. One may be focused on financial benefits. One might be focused on vocational. So I think our services are different in that they take a more global focus and look at how those services are interacting and providing for the individual, and that they are effective, that they're efficient, and that they are meeting the needs of the client.
If you're referring to what, and Sally's correct, when you say care manager, there's also, so the Community Services Board used to have care managers, or what were they called before, support coordinators? I'm drawing a blank. So they have different duties. So a support coordinator is supposed to help support the individual and coordinate services, but they're not going in depth like the advocate does. If we're talking about, for example, like an elder care manager, they could potentially provide all of the services that the advocate is providing. There has to be that plan in place in order for them to do that. And right now, our services, especially when you have a trust with the ARC, are much more than competitive price-wise, and we've intentionally done that to set a lower hourly rate than what elder care managers charge, because it's also a different scenario and setup business-wise, the way they've done that. So again, if it's an elder care manager, if the plan is in place, it could be very similar. If it's a care manager or case manager, it's different. It's a narrower use. Evelyn?
Okay, so there are a few questions asking a little bit about like the finances, about the advocate program. So I'll try to combine them a bit. So a participant is concerned about the cost of the advocate service. If they have a trust with us, how would we, work with you to ensure there's going to be sufficient money in the trust for the advocate service? And if you could just elaborate a little bit about the cost of your services, like what the people are asking, what kind of money they need to retain your services if they don't have a trust. So if you could just elaborate a little bit on that.
So I'll take first the trust part of the question, and then Sally, you can talk more about the cost slide, okay? So the Special Needs Trust, our team, Evelyn, Trini, Karen, and I keep an eye on the balance of the trust. So that's something we're very aware of. Secondly, we keep an eye on the disbursements. Third, our clients, we help create a budget with each of the individuals whenever the trust is fully funded. And the intent is then to maintain the trust for as long as possible, if that's what the parents, for example, have indicated. So we do a type of actuarial. How much money is in the trust? What benefits does the individual receive? How old is that individual? And what disability do they have in case there's a limited lifespan? For example, with Down syndrome, 25 years ago, the lifespan was 40, and now it's 60. So our children are living longer because of medical interventions and better health care. So it's important when making that long-term advocacy plan to prioritize what's important to you. And maybe there are not sufficient funds to do everything that the parent has been doing. So support coordination may be the most important thing for the advocate to do, meaning meeting with all the providers on a monthly or every 2 months or quarterly basis to ensure that services are coordinated and that advocate could be holding those people accountable for what they should be doing. So in that way, you can lengthen monitor the spending and expand that. It's also in the contracts, the amount of time you would like somebody to be spending with the individual. So for example, I said, go to the annual meetings and attend the quarterly meetings. Well, I can also write in my plan, but if the money's running out, try to figure out something else a little more eloquently, right? But, in that plan, it's the intent. So you have to give direction to that. So yeah, there's the possibility that the trust could potentially run out of funding, but that's reality, right? But we're going to help try to budget that money so that it doesn't, we're trying to avoid that situation. Sally, you want to talk about the cost slide?
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that when we set up that initial long-term plan, we certainly can, consider what resources you have to draw upon. And so if cost is limited and you'd rather have longer services, we can look at providing fewer number of hours per month or fewer visits, but being able to be involved for a longer period of time. So that's all flexible. I think as Tia mentioned too, we have sort of a trigger in our system so that if the amount in the trust gets below a certain level, we know that we need to address that. So those are two issues. And I think, you know, at the point that we do try to create a plan that isn't dependent on us, so that we try to put in as many available both family and community resources for different needs and things, so that you know, we're not sort of creating a dependency on the advocacy program. Our idea is to create a plan, help you implement it if you want and need that help and can afford that help. Or if you choose to implement it on your own or with someone else, that's always your option for sure. So, you know, that's the way we operate. So that's always part of, I think, sort of the thinking, is how to create something sustainable for you. We do have an option if a trust is not funded. You can make an escrow deposit with the ARC for $2,000, and so the money can be drawn from that if somebody perhaps was willing to, you know, contribute some money towards advocacy services or something like that. We sometimes do have family members who come out and say, you know, I can help pay for this advocacy plan or something like that. So that's another option.
To kind of add on to the cost questions, a family wants to know, what is the charge for carrying out the, I guess, either long-term or short-term plan with the beneficiary after the parents are gone? Do you just charge like an hourly rate, or is there like a monthly or annual, like, you know, flat fee for that?
Well, that's, if you look on the cost slide where it says immediate plan, that's the hourly rate. And so any ongoing services would be provided at that rate. And so it would be part of that plan. You know, say that the service plan has a specified number of hours, but the representatives is anticipating, you know, their own changes and own needs, and say, well, I just want somebody to monitor. So they may set up, you know, once a month visit, with the option then to have more intensive services provided under a short-term plan if something changes, a crisis arises, something like that. So, you know, you can limit it to simply monitoring, making sure that all the services the person should be providing are being provided and are meeting his or her needs.
I want to stress that anytime anyone else can do it for less than the advocate, we ask them to do it. So we're very cost conscious in that manner.
Thank you. And just one more quick one. One family member is asking if they would be able to develop a long-term advocacy plan. I guess they would want to develop it with you, Sally, but they're asking if they could use that plan with another advocate to follow.
That's, I mean, that's always their option. So for that $1,300 long-term advocacy plan fee, you will get that guidance document. That is the outcome of the full assessment and the coordination and the plan. So you could certainly, if you wanted to, take it to someone else or implement it yourself. Sure. I mean, that belongs to you.
And again, the 1,300 is when you have a trust with the ARC of Northern Virginia, and the 2,000 is when you do not have a special needs trust with us.
Okay, so we still have a lot of questions. So if you guys don't mind, I'm just gonna go through them one by one. This is kind of not related to the advocacy program, but someone is asking if an 18-year-old with schizophrenia can initiate a power of attorney. Maybe Tia, you want to answer that?
Sure. Yes, they can. They can would go to an attorney, preferably, right? Because the best document you're going to get usually is going to come from an attorney. But yeah, they could go to there to do that. The attorney will make the decision probably as to whether or not they feel that person has capacity at that point. not a legal certified determination, of course, but they're going to have to judge whether or not that person is able to sign that power of attorney with the understanding of the contents of it.
I have a situation similar to that right now. And what you would need to do if there's any question about capacity is get what's called a certificate of capacity. And you can just take that to the individual's medical doctor and they can complete that based on an interview and, you know, whatever testing that they want to do. It doesn't have to be a psychological evaluation. As I said, the family physician could do that. In some cases, if there's a real question about capacity, they may want more than one certificate, so you might need to have a second evaluation. But generally, with that certificate of capacity, he or she could sign power of attorney without having to go through court.
Sally, what is a certificate of capacity, please?
What is it? Well, so it's a certificate by a medical professional stating that they believe based on their evaluation that the person has the capacity to understand what they're doing, you know, consequences, and are able to make a fully informed decision.
Thank you. So another question from the webinar folks. Does the ARC advocacy program blend with the PLAN program? And can you have both?
PLAN program is, and they're very similar. So yes, you can certainly have both. And we do have a client who is coordinating that. We're coordinating that with them. So the PLAN program, for those of you who don't know, I'm trying to remember, and I should know what the acronym stands for. Can't remember. I'll look it up. But it's similar to what we do. It's very similar, and we actually work with some with PLAN that's further away because our trust serves Virginia, Maryland, and DC. Right now, our advocates are mostly located in our general, you know, DMV region, as they call it. But we do have clients that are further away, and so we're in the process of finding independent contractors, say in the Baltimore area. But yeah, you can certainly have both, and then we would coordinate with whoever is in charge of the PLAN program for that individual. I don't know if you would really need both, because PLAN would be able to do the exact same things that the ARC advocate would be doing.
Thank you. There's another question that I think Sally mentioned previously about the ADL skill development offered at Loudoun County ARC, for example, the gym. And so their son is in Fairfax County, but would he be able to use the services of ARC of Loudoun for like the gym services? And is there a charge for it?
So and I don't know if Sally's been to the gym yet. There's a, so yes, so you can use that gym. I believe there's a charge, but I don't know. So I'm making little notes here and I'll look up if there's a charge for people that use the gym. I cannot remember. I'm also trying to figure out what the acronym PLAN stands for, and it keeps coming up on their website, but it doesn't tell me. PLAN, there it is. PLAN, by the way, is Planned Lifetime Assistance Network. So the ARC used to be a member of the National Plan Organization that I believe, or I should say international, I believe it started in Canada. We're not a member now, but we do collaborate with them in the annual conferences. This year the conference was canceled due to COVID. So back to that question, and then I'll look up if there's a cost for the ARC of Loudoun's gym.
Thank you. So another question for Sally. Do you have to live in Virginia to utilize your advocacy program?
No, I'm actually serving somebody who lives in Southern Maryland area. So ideally, because an added cost is travel expense to get to where you are. So we are trying to build up our team of advocates, so we would have them located throughout the areas that we serve. But right now, I'm traveling and I'm able to serve anybody within the DMV.
Okay, thank you. We still have a lot of questions, so bear with me. There's a question, sort of aside from the advocate program, how do you get support services without a waiver? Kind of a broad, general question.
Yeah, so the waiver is nice because it addresses specific needs of specific populations, you know, building independence, autism, whatever the identified disability is, but you can piecemeal things. It's a lot more complicated that way, but you know, a lot of the government benefits are separate application processes and not housed under one plan or one waiver. So, you know, housing, financial assistance, medical assistance, those kinds of things. And, you know, there are individual providers, private providers of some of the programs and things that the waivers provide. However, if you qualify, the waiver is paid for. So, you know, you wouldn't have to, plus you don't have to do all of the legwork of identifying alternate resources for things.
And if we're talking about an individual with IDD, then, and you're in Fairfax County, then there are self-directed services, self-directed funding for people that are on the IDD, the DD wait list. But as Sally mentioned, otherwise support services without a waiver, you have to, so if you look at our transition, if you go to the arcofnova.org website and go to the transition points page, there are guides, transition point guides. So let's just say you're looking for housing services. Then in there is a list of providers, and it talks about whether they are paid through the waiver only or waiver and private pay, or what, you know, waiver, private pay, housing and urban development. So it's listed there. When an advocate is involved, then the advocate would assist in identifying the support services needed and help to put those in place. So let me answer hopefully that's a good enough answer. The Arc of Loudoun's gym is called the Ability Fitness Center. It's a gym for people with disabilities. We are a therapeutic fitness and wellness center with expert clinicians and specialized equipment providing access to innovative, customized, and activity-based interventions, et cetera, et cetera. So it's meant for people with spinal cord injuries, brain injuries, stroke, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, cerebral palsy, balance disorders, DD, and other neurological conditions. When I go to find out what the price is, there's no price. There are scholarships. There's some form of membership, but you have to contact them directly to get more information on the cost. But I know that it's open to anyone that wants to travel there, and it's in Leesburg on their Paxton campus. Thank you, Evelyn.
Okay, so there's another question. It's kind of a general question about their specific situation. So maybe this person could benefit from talking with Sally directly. But they have a son who is 45, lives in Arlington, and they have a trust with us. The son would need help with ADLs, but the parents are having trouble finding and coordinating services for him. He is autistic and has mild cerebral palsy and sclerosis, and they don't have a case manager.
Ah.
It
sounds like a
detailed question.
Yeah, that sounds like a really appropriate situation for an advocate. They're focused on the one issue, which is the ADLs, but I think it would be beneficial for this man in midlife to really look globally at his situation, potential resources, all of those kinds of things, and come up with a comprehensive plan. In the short term, we could certainly help look for programs that would offer concrete assistance and training in ADLs, and then work with the caregivers. To reinforce those things at home and create some structure at home for them.
Okay, thank you. Another.
Before you go to the next question, that's something that Sally brought up, and I love the idea. She said to me, there are a lot of the caregivers or family or whomever is involved in the person's life that also needs supports. Can we not also be providing supports to those people as well? And we can. I kind of look at it as an extended family situation where, as she said, what could she be doing to help the parents understand the system better? Or that parent is 85 years old and has Parkinson's and really needs some more supports. What could she be doing? And we can integrate that into the plan, although it's not the primary goal. The primary goal is the individual with disabilities. But if the caregivers aren't caring for themselves, we know what happens. And so I love that idea from Sally. Go ahead, Evelyn.
Okay. Another question is related to our current situation with COVID. Can the advocate Sally help establish a plan for immediate short-term care for the person with disabilities? For example, if a parent or parents are infected and possibly hospitalized, then the beneficiary would maybe need to be quarantined. So if they can work with you to set up some kind of a short-term plan.
Yes, I mean, that would be very appropriate use of advocacy services. I'm kind of handling interactions on a case-by-case basis. I'm not allowed at this point to go into any facilities. So I've just been trying to maintain contact depending on the individual's level of comfort with technology, phone calls, Zoom calls, FaceTime, that kind of thing. So I can't go into the facilities, but I have been meeting, I did initiate a short-term plan last week with a family. So based on the situation, if we can sit outside, we can wear masks, whatever, I am visiting and continuing to initiate services.
And that's an excellent question. That's an excellent question. I could see this individual, the first thing that popped into my head was finding a respite provider that would be willing, that is open and would be willing to have that individual move into that respite site. Or if that individual needed to be quarantined and the parents were out of the house. I mean, there are a lot of factors that come into play, and Sally has resources at her fingertips that could be utilized to find us a solution for this. That's a worry. That's a true worry on that. It's also at the beginning of COVID, I started making dinners and freezing them, because I thought if something happens to me, and my children love to eat, don't we all, that I wanted to make sure that there was food there for them. So, that was my short-term solution. But this person is looking for a longer-term answer, and I like that. Thank you. Evelyn?
So does the advocacy program help with supported decision-making, like helping people understand information so they can make decisions on their own whenever possible?
Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the crux of it, really. Making sure people have the information they need, can understand it and utilize it, make informed decisions based on what their wishes are, the beneficiary's wishes. So we do spend a lot of time looking at options. Let's lay the options out, and based on what we know, let's look at pros and cons, and what do we think is the best route to go at this point in time. And again, that can always change. We can always amend and revise if we need to, but yeah.
Thank you. Just a few more. So we're almost done. Let me see. So this family is concerned that if their adult child is reluctant to meet and engage with providers, is it still possible to, hire you as the advocate, if they're reluctant to work with other people?
Yes, yes, definitely. My initial objective with anybody, any situation, is to establish a bond with them. That's some of the advantage I feel of, going to the client. So rather than making it one more onerous trip, having to coordinate transportation or, that kind of thing, I come to them and hopefully they've been able to sort of let their guard down a little bit. So I really try to engage with them and let them know that, their wishes and needs are guiding the whole process. And with my focus on collaboration, I would hope that we could get that person to a point where they can gradually begin to work with more people. It sounds like, just kind of a trust issue maybe, or maybe privacy, but yes, they can. I mean, we can still coordinate services without them meeting necessarily face-to-face with a lot of different providers.
Thank you, Sally. This person, it kind of goes back to case management. I think this parent is saying that Medicaid waivers cover case management. So is that different from the ARC advocate services?
Yes. By way of example, so I'm working with someone now who has the building independence waiver. And the coordinator, the case manager, is wonderful. She's accessible, all of that, but she's pretty much, in her office and focusing on coordinating services for a large caseload of people. She has certain limited resources available to her to provide and that kind of thing. So I think we're doing an annual review for our mutual client coming up. So I think, it's that collaboration, again, that coordination, our approach being more comprehensive and more global, more community-based and field-based. So we each bring something to the table, and we can coordinate around that.
Okay, thank you. And just two more. So this is a general question, maybe Tia could address this. What happens if the ARC go out of business? How do you guarantee that, I guess, the advocate contract you make with families or another provider will take over, the advocate responsibilities if the ARC does go out of business? Hopefully not.
Yeah, I'll take back that statement to the universe. Good Lord. We're actually doing very well financially. Thank you. Thank you for your support. We have no intent of going out of business and have only been growing. But I have to, so Sally, you've read the contract more times than I do, the services agreement. Mm-hmm. I can't remember how it's addressed in the services agreement. Do you remember how it's addressed in there, Sally?
I don't.
I know that when we so we worked with an attorney to write the service agreement between the independent contractor and the ARC, as well as the service agreement between the client and the ARC. So I wish I could quote that. I can't remember, Gail, but I know that we talked about it. What we did in the past was we referred to people to other providers who provided the same service, and they took on those clients. The difficulty is we can make the arrangements, but we can't guarantee that another provider will take them. although everybody that were referred out did take the clients, their fees were, and I know Sally's looking at the agreement now to see, their fees were more significant than ours, as opposed to 90, you know, 135 or 155 or $185 an hour, as opposed to $90 an hour when you have a trust, or 130. So Sally, we may have to get back to you, Gail, on that question as to what the contract says. I can't remember off the top of my head. But like I said, we referred people to other people, to other providers to do that.
Yeah, I can't reference it right away, so.
Yeah. And Evelyn, what I'd like you to do is, I see this is the last question that we have on the open questions, but if you could go back also, since we still do have about 15 minutes, go back to the questions that I answered while Sally was talking, and maybe ask some of those as well. And in the meantime, I'm going to pull up the service agreement and see what it says.
Okay, great. So I'll just try to focus on the questions related to the advocate program. I think we've already answered a lot of the others, and we will compile all these questions in a PDF and send them out with the slides and the recording this afternoon. So for any of you who missed something, it will be in writing so you can review it. There will be no problem with that. So Sally, there is a question from a parent about just in terms of generally, how's the advocate team staffed? You know, right now but if you want to talk about the plans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so working with a contractor model gives us a lot more flexibility to meet people's needs. As I said, we're hoping to build a team that geographically are located throughout the area, because that, you know, Maryland services are different than Virginia is different than the districts. So to be, you know, more aware of the resources in a particular area, to be closer to the individuals and families, so that we're minimizing cost, travel costs, those kinds of things. I would love to build a team that offers more diversity, both in experience, but also, you know, in ethnic background, cultural background, those kinds of things, languages, you know, so that we have the ability to serve non-English speakers. So those are all the plans right now. I just started in May, so just kind of getting things rolling with some of our existing clients, and doing intakes as soon as I can, but also I have been talking with some social workers that I know of in the field. And I'm convinced, I know there was sort of a bias that it would be hard to find people willing to work you know, in this kind of a contract relationship, but I always have, and it's worked really well for me. You know, it offers flexibility. So there are a lot of people out there who were working full-time, you know, as social workers before they had kids, and now would like the flexibility of being able to work around family needs, some that are in school, you know, for advanced education, and want to have that flexibility. So again, we want to create a diverse team that can respond on a lot of levels.
Thank you. Just trying to go through the answered questions. Let's see. Sorry, just trying to see what's relevant. Is there any particular ones, Tia, that you want to bring up?
So I just looked in the plan real fast, and I didn't see anything specific to us guaranteeing that. So I'll go back, Gail. That's a great question. We do have a clause in there that's term and termination. So I'll go back to the attorney and ask him what type of wording we would need to put in there. Again, it will be impossible to guarantee that anybody would take over the client, but I do know that we have other providers available. Evelyn, in the meantime, 5 other questions just popped up, so why don't we address those?
Okay. So there's a question. The parent has a son who then they want to establish advocate services with Sally after their death. Um, I think a lot of parents are asking is should they, you know, start that now? How would they, when should they start? They're worried that if, they want to have a plan in place after they're gone, but when is the appropriate time to start the plan? Should they do that now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I think when kids are minors, and the caregivers are younger as well, they're able to do a lot more in terms of implementation of the plan. Originally with my daughter, we had identified which family member knew her the best, and had the best situation to be able to support her and meet her needs if something happened to my husband and me. But I think that transition, it's never too early. If you really want to, either you don't have easily identified resources for your person or whatever, it's never too soon to establish it. And again, it's something that's revised and evolves as the person ages and needs change. But I would say that transition from school, 22, from school to more adult services is a good time to really sit down and look at those things.
I guess,
let me just add, yeah. So I hear what Sally's saying, and I understand that. I think it's important, if we have the capacity to do it as soon as you can, whether your child's 2, 22, or 52, because when you go to the attorney and they establish your will, your last will and testament, and your children are minors, they ask you, who do you want to be the guardian of your children if you and your spouse die, right? And so back in the day, I named one of my sisters, and I should have, I wasn't thinking then at all, because, well, I'm immortal. I'm going to live forever. Well, I don't need this. I'll just give you that name, but what the heck, it's never going to happen. But when reality is that anything could happen. So the sooner you start writing it, the better. And I know that it's going to change, especially when they're little, right, Sally? When they're younger, there's a lot of changes going on. Mm-hmm. But it's still important that you have that written down. So don't feel guilty about not having done it yet. And I'm certainly not finished with my girls, and they're 20 and 26. But the sooner you do it, the better. Even if it's not a formalized document like Sally can assist you with, but it's you just sitting down and writing in your journal or typing on your laptop the areas that you feel need to be addressed. I think the sooner you do it, the better.
I guess just to follow up that, forgot to tag on, they're asking would, of course sooner is better, but would their child with disability after the parents are gone be able to initiate, advocacy services with Sally if they need that?
They can certainly, that I think goes back to the issue of capacity. If they, have the ability to dedicate, finances to resources and, sign contracts and things like that. But certainly, if not, anybody who's their representative or guardian or POA could initiate services.
So if they have a trust with us, would they maybe put that in the trust plan to let us know? That's their intention?
Sure.
Yeah. Great. And then another question, and I guess a lot of people are asking about templates and things. If they're interested in a short-term emergency plan, like for example, the situation we provided about if the parents got COVID and they need an emergency plan in place, and also a long-term plan, you give templates, how would that work?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Templates for?
I guess the answer would be they would have to get your services if they want your help to write the plan. but there
Correct,
has to be
because
get templates.
So what we have, they're contractual agreements, and so we do not, unless you've hired Sally or an advocate with the ARC of Northern Virginia to work with you, then we're not, quote, sharing those templates, because those are, you know, basically intellectual property that we've written with attorneys and purchased. So, but you can certainly, if you type in letter of intent into your search engine, you'll, as I mentioned earlier on, you'll get 1 million, if not 1 billion hits, as well as emergency planning. And there's been a lot of emergency planning documents and templates put on the internet, especially since COVID began. American Red Cross, I was just looking at one yesterday to share with my care attendants. I can't remember where that one came from. But you know, we're not necessarily sharing any of those. And the contract, but to let you know, I mean, you look at it, if your children have had IEPs for the short-term plans, you look at it like I would say an IEP. You have a goal, and then you have short-term objectives, or you have benchmarks, right? And then you write out what it is that you would like to see happen. Somebody asked when the next Trust Talk Tuesday was, and Evelyn and I think answered simultaneously. The next Trust Talk Tuesday is July 21st from 10 to 11:30 a.m. So you would RSVP at the arcofnovatrust.org under events. And then it's a Zoom meeting, so you'll get an invitation to log into Zoom at that point. And then here's Sally's information, which you see you have the direct email. She'll do a 15-minute consultation with you just to explain more about what she does, but it is limited to 15 minutes because it's it is a fee for service. And so she could just expand on some of the questions regarding the contracts, but not, go into detail as to service providers, et cetera. Okay, so we only have 3 minutes left. So Ellen asked, do you feel this approach results in a good success rate, Sally?
Yes, I do. I do. Whenever you put the person whose life is, on the line per se, in charge, that put their wishes and needs first, there's a lot better buy-in than telling them what they need to do, and I think it's a very nurturing kind of process. At least that's the way I approach it, nurturing people's strengths and getting them engaged and providing some hope and those sorts of things. And I think that's what makes a situation, a long-term plan successful and advocacy successful.
Thank you, Heidi DePaula, for saying people can look at our website for the rich information available. We appreciate that. Plug for our website, because we have as much information as we possibly can about the Special Needs Trust Program. We're expanding on the advocate pages now. We took them down whenever we were in the transition from having an ARC staff to independent contractor, but we'll be adding to it regularly. And Heidi put up the website for us. Someone also wanted to have Sally's contact information. As you can see, it's right here on the screen. And when Evelyn and Karen prepare the email, that it will include this, as well as FAQ, the presentation that we've reviewed today, as well as FAQs. Thank you, everyone that's thanking us.
I just wanted to note, if anybody tries to get a hold of me, I am on vacation right now. So if it's an emergency, let me know, and of course I'll respond. But otherwise, I'll be back on the 23rd and responding to calls and emails.
Yeah, and we apologize to everybody for that logistical glitch. We planned the series. I planned it a year in advance, and then Sally plans her vacation a year in advance, and they didn't coordinate. So she is on vacation, so leave her be. You can send her an email, obviously, and like she said, eventually she'll get back to you, unless it's a true emergency situation. Sally, thank you so very much for your presentation. It was phenomenal. Karen, who you can't see, one of our webinar leaders, she created the PowerPoint presentation for us, Karen Tan. Thank you very much, Karen, for doing that. She's our project coordinator at the ARC of Northern Virginia. And as always, Evelyn Gu, Assistant Director of Trusts, thank you so much for monitoring this and running the slides and keeping us on track.
Thanks everyone for joining. Just stay tuned. I will email you all the slides, the recording, and the questions and answers. And you guys could just let us know if you have any more questions or feedback. Okay. All righty. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, everyone.